Sometimes when you're driving down the road all by yourself, you begin to hear a voice that tells you need to look around, pay attention. Maybe something isn't quite right. That voice is me. It's the voice of Gord. Good morning, everybody. Quick little intro here for you. I know it's been a couple of weeks again. Just got home from a nice little family camping trip in the northern Adirondacks. And it's time to clean out this backlog of podcasts. I recorded this one in late May with a gentleman named Dale Prax, who's the founder of FreightValidate. And he joins the show to discuss his history in trucking and freight, and trying to help clean out the scammers, the chameleon carriers, the ghost carriers, the double brokers, many of the folks who've been the subject of recent of my writings and podcasts and my podcast guests. My good friend Danielle Schoffin's been writing about this all over the place. She was just published in FreightWaves yesterday, and she started her own Substack with a bit of a monster on the chameleon carriers and scam artists behind that very unfortunate accident in Texas about a week and a half ago where 5 people were killed. It seems like there might have been a 6th. Anyhow, Dale tells us all about how we can avoid that stuff and be proactive if you're a broker, a carrier, a shipper, in isolating and, not using the bad actors who seem to have parasitized the trucking industry in America as of late. As you know, I'm working on a book about the fate of the American truck driver in 2025. End of the Road, Inside the War on Truckers will be releasing next spring. Still working on it. Manuscript will be due in August. I'm right in the thick of it. Can't wait to get it out to you guys. If you think you want to check out what the book is all about, I've got more written on that. I'll have a link in the show notes. If you want to chip in a couple bucks to help me get over the finish line, that'd be good too. And go and check out all of Dale Prax's work, FreightValidate.com. Dale's really big on LinkedIn. There'll be a link to his LinkedIn bio there. And yeah, as always, questions, comments, suggestions, corrections, and hate mail are welcomed and strongly encouraged. Gordylocks at protonmail.com. If you're listening to this on a non-Substack platform, head on over to my Substack, autonomoustruckers.substack.com. Smash that subscribe button. And yeah, you'll never miss any of my written work or podcasts. All right, everybody, let's get to FreightValidate. All right, g'day, everybody. Welcome back to another fantastic episode of the Voice of Gord podcast. I'm Gord, and this is my voice. The other voice you're going to hear today is that of a gentleman I've been made aware of here in the last few months, who has got a very interesting gig, so to speak, and very timely right now, given many of the things I discuss on this podcast and I write about, especially with cargo theft and fraudulent activity in trucking and where that intersects the insourcing of labor from other countries and various scamming going on in the trucking industry, either in the United States or offshore. This gentleman is the founder of a company named FreightValidate. So the other voice you're about to hear is Mr. Dale Prax. Welcome to the show, sir.
Hey, thanks for inviting me, Gord. I really appreciate it. And like I said before we came on, I watch a lot of the podcasts and listen to a lot you're saying. I've seen you on Bannon and some other places, and I'm really glad that we had an opportunity to come together and talk today.
Yeah, well, I mean, I'm not 100% sure about your background, but I guess we're going to find out. I've been in the trucking industry my whole life. Grandpa was a trucker. My dad, both my uncles. My uncle Chris started one of the first freight brokerages in Canada, which, went through a few other sales after he retired and became Uber Freight Canada. And, one of my cousins works for an international freight forwarder and a brokerage in Florida. My other cousin's a dispatcher at a trucking company in Ontario. I drove truck my entire life. So All of this stuff is very important to me. And I hate to see the industry in the state that it's in right now. And part of my project has been to investigate all that stuff. And apparently that's your project too, but you're doing something about it instead of just talking.
Yeah, we're trying to really make a difference. I've been a freight broker for about 32 years. I've been in the industry about 32 years. Several years, I started. I'll back up a little bit. I spent 20 years in the Marine Corps and the Marine Corps Reserve. In my last 6 years, I was an investigator and an inspector instructor on the commanding general's inspection team. So my job is to go out and find problems and fix them. So when I got out of the Marine Corps, I went right into transportation. I started at a small freight forwarder in Minneapolis, Minnesota, and after working there for about a year or so, it was kind of funny. I started there as I knew nothing about air freight. My father was an owner operator. My brother was an owner operator. I've been around trucking and I was a TMO in the Marine Corps, so I knew about logistics a little bit. I didn't know anything about air freight. So after working there, loading trucks for $7 an hour after I got in the Marine Corps, I really started to learn, and I started to find the deficiencies in that company to try and make it better. 6 months later, I was at station manager. So I learned very quickly about how it all worked. But after I was working there for about a year, I said to the owner of the company, I said, there's got to be better ways to move this rather than moving freight by air only. And one of the things we talked about is, if we're paying Northwest Airlines at that time $1 a pound to move freight from Minneapolis to Chicago, that's a lot of money that could be spent much differently. And we talk about, broker transparency and rates and everything. The first load I ever did was a hot shot from Minneapolis, Minnesota to Chicago. It was 5,000 pounds. We couldn't get, there couldn't get capacity on the airlines because there was no wide body service out of there. So I said, let's put this on a truck. And the owner of the company said, that'll never work. Don't do it. I did it anyway. So I paid an LTL carrier $300 to move this 5,000 pounds down to Chicago. It got there faster than a plane would have, and our profit was $4,700. And I said, we got something here. And he said, in my 20 years, that'll never work. So I started an expedited freight company about 2 weeks later and found it does work. Not that we're making $4,700 on every load; those days are long gone. But we're hanging in there. So anyway, that's kind of a background. And so I've been an owner operator since that time. I owned a couple trucks. I owned a trucking company in Minneapolis. I was a third owner of a trucking company. We had about 50 or 60 trucks. And then I really concentrated on the freight brokerage side because I thought I could be more valuable that way. It seems as a freight broker, I could never run out of trucks, right? When I owned a trucking company, we ran out of trucks. And that's about the time that MAP 21 came in. And we, everybody back in those days was they called it overflow. And we were really brokering freight that we got from our customers, right? So MAP 21 kind of changed that. And then you fast forward to like 2020, when COVID came in. And about that time, that's when just things went off the rails. I mean, fraud really started 2020.
Right. Just I was going to get you to back up real quick for my listeners who don't know. Yeah. Can you explain to them what MAP 21 is?
Okay, MAP 21 is Public Law 112-141, and it explains that all of the nuances that were causing fraud back in those days, like you had to have brokerage authority to move to broker freight. Carriers were consistently moving freight under the guise of being a carrier, but then they were transferring that overload freight or overflow freight to other carriers. The carrier's name was on the bill of lading. Something bad would happen. Next thing you know, no one knows how to pay the claim, right? So MAP 21's was, the ideology behind that was to fix those problems. Part of MAP 21 is it said that all brokers must have 3 years experience or be trained as a broker. That law was signed over a decade ago, and that still isn't happening, right? So there's a lot of great ideas in MAP 21, but there's been very little enforcement of MAP 21. You look at affiliations. Paragraph 32103 of MAP 21 says that if you're affiliated with another motor carrier or FMCSA regulated entity, you must disclose that to the FMCSA. We find hundreds and hundreds of companies that own multiple MC numbers that never disclose it to the FMCSA. I think the worst part about that issue is that even though that information is submitted on the OP1 or the application for operating authority, there's nowhere in the public sector without going through the Freedom of Information Act to find out who is affiliated with other companies. So if that information is being added to the application, why don't they make it available to the stakeholders in our industry to see who's affiliated with these other companies? So we're not, and if they lie about that I'm not affiliated with anyone, well, now we have the authority to take away we have the ability to take away their authority, revoke their authority because they lied on their application. But there's no one checking to see who's lying on applications. So we've come into a really big problem. Map 21 is great, but if you don't enforce it, it doesn't matter.
Right. Yeah. What use is the law if there's nobody to back it up? Well, so yeah, and you mentioned 2020. We had a COVID sort of freight demand spike in 2021, and that's sort of like I would assume the fraud problem really took off then as well.
Oh my gosh, I honestly believe that's where fraud really kicked in, because what happened in the United States, there was so much freight coming in. That was probably our best years when there was, because no one could go anywhere. So you're ordering everything from Amazon and everything's being delivered. So trucks were just going crazy. And thank God for the truck drivers because they ran into the storm, right? They're still working while we're sitting at home. So the problem is we had a government, basically a shutdown. No one could go to work. The freight's going crazy, so we couldn't hire anybody. Then top that off, our government was giving people not only money, unemployment money to stay home, some states were even adding to that. So we got guys making $52,000 a year for sitting at home playing video games and watching Scooby-Doo. So we couldn't get them to come to work. So our only alternative was to start turning to offshoring or nearshoring. We'd go to Ukraine, we'd go to the Philippines, we'd go to Colombia and just start hiring people. And I have to say that these people are very hard workers because they weren't making much money in those countries. And when they get an opportunity to work over here for somebody remote, they're getting paid, not as well as people in the United States, but as a ratio, they're getting paid really good money in their country, right? So then you go about 6 months, 8 months, maybe a year after that, people had to start coming back to work. So now the freight companies are saying, okay, they're coming back to work. I can start getting rid of these employees that we hired overseas. And many of these employees are some of the best brokers that you'll ever meet in your life. They are hardworking guys, learn the skills and learn how to broker freight very well. So when they started losing their jobs, they said, we've been used to this great standard of living for the last year and a half. But they learned that they could get an authority very easily, $300, a Visa gift card, and some insurance, and a BOC3. They could put that their name was Charlie Brown in the application. They lived in Chicago in a post office box or a UPS store, and they were in business. So now, rather than making that $600 or $1,000 a month, these guys are pulling in 20 grand a month, right? Because they learned the business and they were in business and they were good at it. They told their friends said, this is very lucrative. Now we start getting authorities for trucking companies, not having to hire a single driver because they were just double brokering freight back and forth between all of their companies all around the world. And so it just got worse and worse and worse. And there was no oversight from the government to take care of it. Then we start building.
I hate to interrupt. I just want to back up here to make sure I've got something right. There's an interesting point you made there I want to highlight. The government's giving people money during COVID, right? And so everyone's hanging out at home. You can't get people to come to work. Why would I work? I'm getting checks from Trump or Biden or whoever, and I'm just hanging out at home. And so now you start hiring dispatch services, freight brokers, people to do all the back end stuff, Philippines, Colombia, Serbia, wherever. And as you say, they learned the business and, good for them. But it's just so interesting to me that we have a couple of problems of government here. The government's not enforcing any of their own rules. And because they paid a bunch of people to sit around at home and not do anything over a marginally, minimally effective virus, now they created another problem because they hired, business response hires all these people from outside of America to do the work. And then all of a sudden, okay, cool. Well, the money spigot got turned off. The Americans got to pull their thumbs out and go back to work. Sorry, out in-source labor bros. We don't need you anymore. So, it only sort of follows that, of course they would be like, okay, cool. The gringos kicked us out, but we know their whole system now. We're just going to keep working on it. And that never would have happened if the government wouldn't have paid people to stay home.
I think that had a lot to do with it, obviously. I think that, and now I'm not saying that I'm totally against offshoring or nearshoring if it's done right, if you need to have it, right? If you're hiring somebody that's an employer of record or something, you're doing it all right. we weren't doing that. We were sending money directly to them, so they had no benefits. They were in violation of their own country's laws, right? So that now you separate it that way too. Is like now we're violating those other countries' laws. The other problem that comes in when one of those guys does something wrong and steals your load or steals your identity or does something bad, we can't even enforce our laws in the United States. Who's going to go over to the Philippines or the Ukraine or any of those countries and arrest somebody or do something about it? We're just going to say, man, we got our ass kicked again.
Yeah, that's another aspect to it too, right? I mean, and this isn't just with like trucking or freight or transportation. There's all kinds of like offshore people that are like, because of the internet, are in our business, right? Like a few months ago, my wife got scammed and we had to like rechange all our banking stuff because she wouldn't listen to me. Because
Yeah.
she hands me the phone and this guy with an Indian accent pretending he's the security. We're checking out on the accounts for your guys' credit union. I'm like, yeah, it's a little tiny credit union in upstate New York that why would they hire Indians offshore? And I hung the phone up on him. But by then, my wife had given them all this information and screwed her bank accounts up, right? Like, oh man, this stuff is just, and nobody's doing anything about it, right? And then you turn around and you say to the government, like, hey, we have these problems. And what do? Well, actually, we're just going to hire more of these people and issue more H-1B visas. It's like,
Yeah.
it seems when you sort of zoom out and look at everything in total, it really looks like the government's not doing anything to help problems here that affect people here.
Right. And this is an example I give when I speak at conventions and trade shows and things. A lot of people don't know that the Federal Register is really kind of what runs the United States as far as regulations, laws, and all those kind of things. In the Federal Register dated August 23rd, 2013, they talked about the FMCSA getting $390 million to modernize the Unified Carrier Registration Program because it was broken. Been broken for 20 years before that. Two systems don't talk to each other, those kind of things. So $390 million, $360 million over a 10-year period to fix it, modernize it, revamp it, do all those kind of things. In that regulations, on page 29 of the Federal Register of that date, August 23rd, 2013, it says that part of the money that we're going to give you, FMCSA, is so that you can vet all motor carrier applications before they come in, right? Passenger, household goods, vet these applications. We're going to give you the money to do it. Everybody says, that's great. They're going to investigate and they're going to do vetting, right? But what people don't look at are footnotes in those regulations. Footnote 68 on page 29 of that regulation says, and I'll paraphrase a little bit, but I pretty much got it down. While the FMCSA has the authority to vet all motor carriers, it is currently only vetting those motor carriers who have passenger or household goods authority. So to put that in perspective, that means that less than 2% of all motor carrier operating authorities are vetted. What does that mean to us? If you were going to fill up a 737 full of people at the airport, they would say, if you're in the middle row of first class, you have to go through security. The rest of you, come on in. That's where the problem started.
Wow. Yeah. So lack of vetting. And then, so there's been quite a bit of chatter on Twitter, FreightX, whatever you want to call it, because there's been a number of collisions and crashes the last couple of years involving these sort of no-name carriers that like subcontract to Amazon, and people start going into the safer system to chase down the MC numbers. And we're finding that like there's addresses with like 700 MC numbers registered to them, and it's just some guy's house in California. There was an incident in Alabama earlier this week. A truck driver from the Ukraine driving a truck owned by one of these like Serbian gangsters in Chicago and registered to a pizza place next to a Dunkin' Donuts out in the suburbs of Chicago somewhere. Like that's the actual physical address of that MC number. And then there's a bunch of other ones there too. And it's like a pizza place is not a trucking company. Like if the FMCSA actually investigated them and walked in the front door, they could get pizza. Could they get any information about the carrier, the truck, the safety inspections on the equipment, any of that stuff? Probably not.
Now, what we have to understand is there's two separate issues here, right? One is a virtual office, which is maybe a shared office location. And someone could be working at two companies unrelated could be working at the same office. Maybe they can't afford an office. They're friends. They say, let's rent an office together. But if you look at 3377 California Avenue in Signal Hill, California, that building is 1,200 square feet. There are two signs out front that say no truck parking. You couldn't fit two cars in their parking lot. Currently, there are 376 current MC numbers that are affiliated that show that place as their principal place of business address. 250 of those have the same email address, which is WTFFMCSA@AOL.com. Does that just scream there's a problem here?
Yeah.
I reported that to the FMCSA back in 2023, April 2023. They said, we don't see anything here. There's no there, because there's a contractor on board there that handles all those trucking companies. Well, your own law says that you can't be a contractor and work as a virtual office. So also in 2024, I notified the FMCSA that they were letting in 200 applicants per month, registrants per month, that listed a PO box, a Staples store, a UPS store as their principal place of business. That's 50 a week. So when I went to Matt's in 2024, I brought a stack of almost a couple thousand companies that they let in over the previous 8 months or so. And those were protest letters that I wrote to the FMCSA and to the applicant saying, you're in violation of the law. You shouldn't get your authority. Those guys all got their authority, except for some of the folks that got the letter and they just kind of dropped out and didn't finish their application. So industry showed FMCSA how to fix that. We built a robot on how to identify it and detect it and find it. So I spoke to Ken Riddle, who is the director of registration at FMCSA, while I was at Matt. So I said, Ken, this is a problem. He took those letters back and he said, I promise to fix this. 8 months later, they fixed the problem. Since that time, there's not been even one. We watch it every day. There hasn't been one issue, right? The problem I have there is, what about the 4,000 that are currently active? What are you doing about those? You know how to fix it for the new guys. Let's go get the bad guys. All you have to do is, if I can identify them and give them the list, send them a show cause order that says, until you become in compliance, we're going to give you 90 days, and then we're going to shut your authority off, right? And that's what they should do. Shortly after that, the deal in 2023, and I'm just kind of switch gears a little bit and talking about government, what they should do and what they're not doing. On May 22nd, 2023, a month after I reported those WTF, that whole thing at Signal Hill, 6 U.S. senators and 2 members of the House of Representatives wrote a letter to, at that time, the OIG, Office of Inspector General. His name is Eric Soskins at that time. Wrote him a letter saying, we have a problem with fraud, double brokering, cargo theft. We have 3,500 cases that we want your office to investigate and look into these schemes and see what's going on. That was in May of 2022, May 22nd, 2023. That letter was written by, the authors of that letter were Senators J.D. Vance from Ohio. There was John Thune from South Dakota. And there was Mike Braun, who's now the mayor of Indiana, owns a trucking company. Those are 3 of the people that wrote the letter. Pretty influential people. One of them is now the vice president. One is now the leader of the Senate. And one is a governor. Months later, in August of 2023, they got a response back from Mr. Soskins and the OIG. Says, we've investigated 25 of those cases that have to do with household goods and made no mention of anything. Well, what about the other 3,475?
I remember that now, the household goods thing. I think I cited that in one of my own articles. So just for anybody that's listening to this, right? Like, there's lots of trucking industry people that listen to the show, but for like the general purpose audience, how bad is freight fraud? Like, what's the scale of it? How much is it costing people? And what are the various forms of freight fraud? Like, there's people that like double broker loads and skim off the top, and that's illegal. And then there's like stealing loads, right? Like, what does it all look like?
Yeah. If I get back up just a little bit before I go into that letter to the OIG also urged the agency. It said the OIG has the authority and capability to start a permanent fraud task force. We're asking you to do that. In the response that came back, there was no mention of that. Imagine how our world would be today had the government listened to those officials, senators, saying to do something. They ignored it completely. where would we be today if they'd maybe taken that word? So I've written letters to all those authors to that letter 2 months ago saying, you didn't get it done as a senator. Now that you're the vice president, sir, could you maybe talk to the Secretary of Transportation and get this fixed? Start a freight fraud task force. If you can't do it or you don't staff to it, I could put a coalition of industry experts together. You fund it, we'll fix it. So fast forward to now. Since that time, since that letter was written in 2023 asking for help and it was ignored in 2023, fraud has grown by 400%. 400%. Cargo theft has grown by, $1 billion. So we're just not doing anything to fix it. So what happened now? There's double brokering, there's freight fraud, there's stealing identities, there's buying MC numbers. All these things are just being unregulated. The problem that I have with that is we're not training our folks how to fight this kind of thing. We're throwing software at them and we're throwing, platforms that go online and check somebody. But now we're not teaching people how to use that software, right? So the only ones that are learning from this are the bad guys. They have big business. They have training sessions. We're giving them sometimes a playbook. Every time we come up with another way to fight fraud, they're saying, okay, let's get around that. And I'll give you an example. In the past, probably 2 years, one of the red flags, we'll call it, for fighting fraud is the guy hasn't had his authority for 6 months or more, or 9 months, or whatever that number comes to be, right? The bad guy looks at that and says, okay, this is an opportunity. The good guy, let's say during that time, Yellow closed down, right? A lot of drivers lost their jobs. So if I'm a driver at Yellow, I've been working there for 30 years, I got 3 million miles on my belt, I say, I'm not working for the man anymore. I'm going to go buy a truck. I'm going to go into business for myself. I know the road. I know everything about it. I speak English. I do all those things that are supposed to be done right. But I can't get a load because I've only been around for 3 months. The bad guy looks at that and says, well, I know my way around. I'll contact somebody that's going to go out of business. I'll buy their MC number from them. I'll get their email address password. I'll get their DAT password, their Amazon passwords. I'll get all that stuff. I'll be moving freight tonight. I don't have to wait 6 months.
Right. So they're buying. One of the methods they're using to get into the fraud game is buying old companies that are like either defunct or the people want to get out of it.
Yes, absolutely. We have platforms. We have built systems to kind of detect that. Just last week, we've had 3 that we detected in a week, and we're just, again, I'm one guy. We had 3. We had a guy from Mississippi who got a letter or a text, and drivers are getting them every day. The bad guys they obtain lists of pending insurance cancellations. That's their trigger. If you're gonna go out of business, you cancel your insurance. To get notified, it expires in 35 days or so after that, right? So they're getting these lists and saying, hey, Mr. Truck Driver, I see you're going out of business. The driver normally says, I'm going to do something else. I'm going to retire. Well, how about if I give you $6,500 for that MC number? I'll send it by Zelle. And the driver, this guy been around for a long time, says, well, I was going to go out of business anyway. $6,500, that pays my mortgage for the next 2 months. And, sure, why not? Why wouldn't I take it? So we contact them and say, something's wrong here, right? If they're not buying your entire company, which means assets, stock, liabilities, all those kind of things, then you're doing something wrong, right? Because you can keep the DOT number with it, we just move on. If they're just buying your MC number, and the first thing we ask them for is a copy of the bill of sale, right? Because these guys send these fraudulent piece of crap bills of sale. And the bill of sale says, we're not buying your entire company. We're just buying your MC number. We're also buying the password for your email address. We're also buying your DOT number or your DOT PIN number. And the guy sells it all to them, thinking I'll never use it again. And all of the letters, the bills of sale say, we'll take care of everything with the FMCSA for you, right? Of course they will.
Yeah.
So, and where the rubber meets the road is if you're going to buy an MC number as a asset, right? You're just buying that. Then you have to get a new DOT number. DOT numbers aren't transferable unless it goes with the entire organization. So how we caught these guys is we found out that they bought just the MC number. We have the bill of sale. And then we contact FMCSA, who contacts the old guy to say, how'd you sell it? Show me a copy, verify everything that we did. Then they contact the new guy and ask him if he applied for a DOT number. When he says no, they shut him off. So in these 3 cases last week, one was sold for $6,700, one for $10,000, and one for $20,000. That guy had been around for a long time. They gave him $20,000 for his MC number. We were able to get them shut off. So now, not only is that bad guy out his 20 grand, within 2 or 3 days, he hadn't been able to move freight on, so he hasn't returned a profit either. So you want to talk about somebody that's pissed off. They just lost $20,000 and they'll never make money off of it again. We had one of the guys call me to say, hey, this is so-and-so, in a not American accent. Why did you shut me off on your platform, FreightValidate? Because your authority's gone, because you bought, and this guy did not sound like the guy that I spoke to the day before from Mississippi with a deep Southern Mississippi accent. And he said his name was the same name as this guy, right?
Right.
So we're doing things to catch that sort of thing. But the FMCSA's position is we don't have control over the sale of assets, right? They stopped approving the sale of an MC number a few years ago. But when that stopped, that didn't eliminate the responsibility to know who owns that MC number. They still have a responsibility there, and that's been shirked.
How is it that they don't shut down an MC number like they do a DOT number, make it non-transferable? What would the mechanism be to make it so that, like, when this entity that is registered to this MC number, be it a trucking company, a broker, whoever, goes out of business or shuts her down, MC number's over?
Well, that's what they should be doing, but a lot of times that sale happens, so it keeps it going, right? One thing that I'm a real opponent of is reactivating an MC number. I think once it shuts down, it's done. You reapply, you do everything you're supposed to do. The other issue is that the way they wanted to fix is going back to 1996. They said, let's get rid of MC numbers, have one database, just DOT numbers. And so they've been talking about that for several years. Last year or the year before at MATS, they said October 2025 is going to be the day we stop issuing MC numbers. Sounds good, sounds great. They've been reporting it on FreightWaves and everywhere that October 25th, 2025 is the date. So I spoke to the FMCSA and I said, let's really think about this. If you get rid of MC numbers on October 25th, we're talking just a few months from now, what will happen to the industry? Well, first of all, the industry is not ready for it because the first question asked when tendering or accepting a load is, what's your MC number? Most every TMS system is designed behind the MC number. No one really has DOT numbers in there yet. A lot of TMSs, load boards, there's a lot that's got to change first. We can't just throw it out there and say we're getting rid of it, right? The problem that's even worse than that is a reason why I told the FMCSA they weren't ready to do it, and they have canceled it. Now it's going to be indefinite. We don't know when it's going to happen. But within FMCSA, there are three database systems. One is the Motor Carrier Management Information System. We all know as MCMIS or Company Snapshot. There's L&I, Licensing and Insurance, which handles most of the information from an MC number. And then there's SMS, which handles the safety side. Those three systems do not talk to each other. So today, when I spoke to the FMCSA on that particular day, there were 127,000 companies who had an inactive or revoked MC number, but an active DOT number. So if they shut down MC numbers, we just put 127,000 people back in business that we don't know anything about that had authority revoked because they have an active DOT number. So the response I got back from them was, well, they could be intrastate carriers. They don't need an MC number. First of all, I'm thinking 127,000. There are only 330,000 active motor carriers today. So that's debunked right there. And even further, of those 127,000, 66,000 of those are brokers. So you're telling me we have intrastate brokers? I don't think so. So obviously, it's not time to get rid of the MC number yet.
Yeah, no, a lot of this is bizarre and the numbers are crazy. So I want to zoom out a little bit, right? Like people who don't are outside of the universe of trucking sort of don't understand the difference between the sort of like the spot market, contract market, sort of larger and mega carriers. And a lot of this freight fraud stuff and cargo theft typically doesn't happen with the big guys, right? Because like they're established, they've been around for a while, they've got set contracts with big companies, they move the same thing down the same lanes. Like they're sort of outside of all of this in a way. But then there's the spot market and loads getting moved through brokers. And I've been outside of the freight game myself for a long time. Like as a driver, I kind of picked up immediately that any trailer with doors on it's when you're losing time, getting detained, doesn't pay that well. I've always stuck to specialized carriers, right? I've hauled fuel. I've hauled huge oversized stuff. I've hauled logs, propane. I stayed out of freight world and I've been out of it for a long time. So I'm just like, one of the things that I had a hard time wrapping my head around, I went to FreightWave's Future Freight Festival in Chattanooga a couple of years ago, and they had a lot of products there and people pushing their software products, which are basically like trust, right? Like, hey, we're going to check these MC numbers. And everyone had like, there was like 25 different versions of the same thing, right? All these different software packages. And it's like, does anybody know who's actually hauling their freight? Is there like a direct relationship between companies and the stuff they're moving anymore? Like, if I've been out of it that long, like, is it completely just like Wild West, anything goes, like moving freight? Like, what's going on?
It is completely the Wild West. No one really knows for 100% certainty who's hauling their freight. Now, you mentioned about the big carriers that aren't affected by it very much, but I'm here to tell you they are. The difference is they have the money to support it. If they lose a $2,500 shipment or get ripped off, they have a fund set aside to make sure that happens, right? But now you look at Landstar, who's been hit by fraud very hard. As a matter of fact, I think they extended their quarterly meeting because they've been hit by fraud so badly. The other thing is those big companies, if they admit to having this fraud action happen, they could lose that customer. That shipper loses confidence in the broker, right? Now, the small guy, on the other hand, if he loses a $2,500 load because it's stolen or doesn't get paid for it, there's an issue, right? Now it becomes a big safety issue. FMCSA says, well, we're in the safety realm. Well, you're also in compliance. If you're not, then give it to TSA or somebody that can handle compliance, right? If a driver loses $2,500 on a stolen load or he's not getting paid for it, he has a decision to make. Do I feed my family and pay my mortgage, or do I buy new tires, right? So it is a significant risk for the small guys. And I brought this up to the folks at FMCSA also. I don't know if you've started, they have the new modernization program for the new registration system, right? They're making it easier, making it harder to get into. But I'm the kind of guy that I suppose since I spend my time in the Marine Corps, you have to know the enemy if you're going to fight a war, right? You have to know what they're going to do. You have to think ahead and say, if I do this, they're going to do that, right? I don't think the FMCSA thinks that way very much, nor does anybody in the government really, I suppose. If we're going to, for instance, I started facial recognition verification. I think that's a very good way to catch folks, right? You know with 100% certainty who you're talking to. You know the location. We have in our system that we can identify who this person is. So FMCSA kind of took that idea and said, okay, we're going to implement that. And they did about 2 weeks ago. But I'll tell you the flaw behind that. Their system is used through IDEMIA, and they have a contract with IDEMIA. IDEMIA, if you're not familiar with them, are the folks when you go to the airport and you show your ID, they say, okay, this matches. You are who you are. Go ahead into the baggage area, right? Or drop your bag off or go to your gate. The problem with transportation with that idea is that it identifies who the person is and it matches the driver's license, but it doesn't say who's behind the operation. I could have a driver's license that says Charlie Brown, and that's me, and it all matches, but Jim Smith is opening the company, right? So how do they put the two together? And I've told them for 3 years now, and this kind of bothers me, I've told them for 3 years now, if you want to stop fraud or significantly reduce it, you require anybody that applies for authority or maintains authority to obtain a TWIC card, a Transportation Workers Identification Credential. I've been saying this for years.
I was about to ask that because when we were at Matt's, my friend Justin, Super Trucker, on Twitter, we bumped into you, and he's like, hey, this is the guy that stole my idea. And that was you. That's when we met. And you mentioned that some FMCSA guy at Matt's this year did not know what a TWIC card was.
Absolutely. And that's what I was
How is that possible? How do they not know?
Again, it all goes to training, right? The FMCSA is not trained. Brokers aren't trained and carriers aren't trained. We're just trying to throw software at it to say, hey, if you do this, you'll be good, right? You can't. There has to be accountability. There has to be an audit of your processes. There has to be training. And then you add technology to that. It's really a three-legged stool, right? If you take out technology, you're going to fall. If you take out training, you're going to fall. If you don't have process in place, you're going to fall. All three of those have to be there.
Right.
The problem is not, and it was a senior person at FMCSA that said, I don't even know what a TWIC card is.
The people that are listening to this that don't know, you said Transportation Worker Identity Credential. I used to have one. Ostensibly, I think they're mainly for people going on and off ports.
Right.
And the verification to get a TWIC means they know you live here in the United States. That's the main thing, right?
You have to show up in person to get it.
You have to show up in person to get it. I remember I had to do the whole biometric,
Fingerprints.
yeah, the whole 9 yards. And the thing about that, the implication behind that, and this is where the conversation might get spicy, is how much of this freight fraud, to your estimation, given that you've been involved in this industry for so long, involves offshore entities or labor that's been insourced to the United States very recently?
I don't know that exact number, but I will tell you that fraud started in packets, like in Glendale, California, Chicago, Illinois. It was all these separate entities. And the analogy I make to that is for the people in the old school that remember that before the WWE or WWF, there were these small wrestling organizations like Vern Gagne had Minneapolis and Jerry Lawler had the AWA or whatever in all over the country, right? And that's kind of how fraud was going on. Like the Glendale gang would do their thing, Chicago would do their thing. But then here comes Vince McMahon of freight fraud and puts it all together and makes it international, right? We're shipping stuff overseas that gets stolen every single day. I don't know what the percentage is. I know this is very large. I don't know what the exact numbers are, but every time we talk to somebody that's involved in the fraud thing, generally it's something that's going overseas or affiliated with somebody overseas. And that's happening tremendously.
Right. So the TWIC card idea would help reduce that, because if you are a broker and all the people that work at your brokerage have to have TWIC cards, if any funny business goes on, at least FMCSA or some other enforcement organization can roll up to your address because it's been confirmed that you're actually here.
Well, yeah. And I think that there's a couple of reasons why TWIC card is important. First of all, this is a national security problem. We are facing problems in national security, right? So Homeland Security runs that organization through the TSA. So why don't we just say compliance for trucking goes over just like the ports do? TSA handles it, right? And here's just some quick math, right? The contract with this IDEMIA situation or program is about $20 million for 3 years. I may be off, but it's about $20 million for a 3-year contract that they signed. Everybody that has a TWIC card knows it costs about $125 to get it. A lot of people don't know that it costs the government about $65 to process it. Net profit about $65, right? So 600,000 truckers apply for and are granted a TWIC card every year to go into the port, go into the airports, 600,000 a year. About 50 to 60,000 people apply for operating authority every year. About a 10% increase over what they're already doing, right? So could we add a 10% increase to the folks over at TSA to hand out those TWIC cards to all those owners of companies? I think we probably could. Is there profit in it to do it? Yes, there is. So if they would have done that, rather than signing a $20 million contract for 3 years, we could have charged 60,000 entrants $125, be super secure, and made a profit of $11 million. So we're ahead $32 million by doing it that way.
That makes way too much sense. That's not government thinking.
Yeah, so that would be, and you're secure, right? And the other thing is, a TWIC card's good for 5 years. If you get your authority today, in 30 years as a broker, they may never come and see you. Why shouldn't that have to be renewed just like a TWIC card is? Every 5 years, I'm going to have you come in and renew everything, right? Another aspect of that, who from Pakistan, India, Serbia is going to come to the United States to do a background check, stand behind a camera, fingerprints, all that kind of thing, just to get their authority over here? Probably not going to happen. And they have it backed up, right? You're not a U.S. citizen. You can't get a TWIC card. What's going on? Then that's where exceptions could come in, right? And if I had a TWIC card associated to my MC number, what do you think are my odds of selling that to somebody I don't know? My name's behind it. My fingerprints are behind it. Before I sell this to you, you need to get your TWIC card.
Right. Yeah. There's a more substantial trail to follow when things start going wrong. Right.
Now, and you're under Homeland Security. It affects, if you lose your TWIC card or you do something wrong with your FMCSA, violate the law, you should have your TWIC card taken away. You should have, and I think that once that happens, you can't even apply again for 10 years.
Right. Well, one of the problems, and so, our mutual friend, Tanya Iser at WFAA, she did an investigation into this truck crash in Fort Worth back in 2021. And it was a subcontractor who got a load through a double broker to move a FedEx trailer. And the double brokering operation was a guy from Uzbekistan, right? And then,
So was the carrier that FedEx gave the load to,
right.
or who the broker gave the load to. He was from Uzbekistan. His friend was from Uzbekistan. They're connected to 3 other companies together. That group owns several hundred companies. That guy that gave the load to the other guy and the guy that caused the crash, they're both still in business. They have a company that buys and sells MC numbers.
That sounds bizarre to me. And why is that legal? And why is it still going on
It's not legal.
after everything they've done? That's
Right.
that's it's been through the court of law. Like everybody knows exactly what happened here. Yet that guy's out there still hustling freight
And selling MC numbers and selling and targeting people from foreign countries. We'll get you set up in the United States to run freight here. He's based in the company's based in Florida. He's selling MC numbers and buying MC numbers every day. We'll give you a turnkey. You can come into business. Start hauling Amazon freight tonight.
Wow. And so I'm assuming you've forwarded all that info onto FMCSA.
Yes.
Are they doing anything?
No.
Oh man. What's that? Actually, maybe we get off, you could forward me the website to this gentleman's business.
I will.
That's interesting. I'm in the middle of writing an article for Zero Hedge about this very problem. And that would be good extra intel to have. Thank you very much for that, Dale.
I mean, if you go to Facebook and look up buy your MC number, sell your MC number, there are hundreds of people advertising, I'm selling my MC number, I'm buying an MC number. It's insane. I mean, I know there are only 1,100 employees at the FMCSA, and I'll give them that, but I'm only one person. And if I can find all these people at 30 North Gould Street in Sheridan, Wyoming, that have, whenever I talk to somebody, and that address it's crazy, right? You're saying to me that you're at 30 North Gould Street in Sheridan, Wyoming. Are you wearing a cowboy hat with that accent? I doubt it.
Well, this is it. I mean, I get accused of being a xenophobe and a racist and all that stupid stuff because I talk about this, but it's like the issue is not what somebody looks like. The issue is that the industry, the American trucking industry, the American freight industry, the Canadian freight and trucking industries are being parasitized by all of these gangsters from overseas that are trying to skim the value out of what we do, right? That money should be staying here to pay for maintenance so that guys run safe equipment, to pay drivers better so that they stick around the industry and don't quit so much. Because like my main beat that got me into all this was talking about the retention problem. That's also caused by the government. And then these guys come in here and by withdrawing the value out of our system, they make all this stuff worse, right?
Yeah.
It's not like I hate people from other countries. It's just like, no, do things here by our rules and by our rate structures and by our way of doing business, and let's keep it all here. But that's not what they're doing.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. And the other thing is they're backed by a lot of money. There's a lot of money backing this, right? So when a guy comes in there are rednecks from Mississippi that are bad guys too. So I just don't like bad guys. I don't care what color, I don't care if you're a bad guy, I don't like you, right?
Yeah, right. So, exactly.
So I don't care where they are, but they're backed by a lot of money. So they can come in here and say, I'll take loads for 80 cents a mile all day long, because all they're doing is paying tuition to learn how to run this stuff, right? And so they're running for 80, 90 cents a mile, start getting on lanes, doing a great job, delivering on time, all that kind of stuff. They're not worried about that 80 cents a mile. They're worried about that $300,000 load of Nikes that they're going to sell for a lot more than 80 cents a mile.
Right. So one last thing, I know we're going to run out of time here soon. My friend Shannon told me about this new term I think applies to this. You can tell me if it's good or it makes sense. He's calling them ghost carriers because of the fact there's just these MC numbers registered all over the place and they're hard to track down.
Yeah. Yeah.
Is that a term you use as well?
I don't really use that term. I see it written a lot, but I have so many terms in my brains for bad guys. I get kind of criticized because I call most of them scumbags and all. I maybe have a different vocabulary, but there's a tremendous amount of companies, and I'll give you an example too. Is like I don't remember back in July of 2024, I think it was. I think like Freight Caviar, somebody called it the Ocean's 11 project, right? Where they had 25 companies involved in this thing. They're all connected to each other. And most of these platforms, and I appreciate all the platforms, the software that's coming in because it's helping. But the minute we start depending on that and not doing due diligence and thinking and making humans make decisions based on maybe recommendations of that software rather than the software making the decision for us. In that particular platform, one of the people that was involved in that, she owned 14 companies, all listed with the same spelling in the Secretary of State's office because that's how you open a bank account, right? But with FMCSA, she spelled her name 14 different ways. One with the KRY, one with the CHR, and they didn't check any of that or match it against the Secretary of State's office. So what people thought were 24 companies involved in that, we found there were 105 companies involved in that. Oof. That weren't matching up. So that's an issue. The other part is that if you depend solely on data from my platform, anybody else's platform, you're just not doing enough. You're not doing yourself justice. For instance, if somebody says, I'm not going to give you freight because you haven't had any inspections, are they checking to see if there may be a sprinter company or a small expedited company who doesn't have a commercial motor vehicle that not required to get a roadside inspection? You have to think a little bit, rather than listening to, or they say, we're going to give the load to that guy even if he's had no inspections because he's not a commercial motor vehicle. Well, the minute that guy puts on over 1,000 pounds of hazmat, or that vehicle goes over 10,000 pounds, he is a commercial motor vehicle. He needs to have a DOT number on the door. Who's policing that? No one.
No.
If I get a load and it says everything's good through this platform, say it's whatever platform it is that you're using, it says this guy's good, MC number matches, everything's great. But who's checking to see if, and you may know what one is, but a lot of people don't. Do you know what an enterprise carrier is?
Oh, I've heard the term. I'm a little fuzzy on what the definition is.
An enterprise carrier is someone the company is owned by an individual or corporation in another country, like mostly in Mexico, but they have a principal place of business here in the United States. They get issued an MC number just like any other company would, but their certificate shows what the requirements are for being an enterprise carrier. The main requirement is you can only bring freight into the United States or out of the United States. You can't move freight between like Kansas to Kentucky. Now, if you don't know that, you're going to give that guy freight, right? Because he's got an MC number. It checks out really well. The only way to find he's an enterprise carrier is go to Safer. Then you look at it and says, okay, he's good. But you have to look at, within Safer, you have to look at authority history. Then it comes up and says enterprise carrier. Unless you do all that, you're not going to know. The software platforms aren't picking that up. So now what happens when you give that load to that guy? First of all, he's operating out of his own authority, out of what he's been granted. He can't take freight interstate. So now is insurance going to be covered when he gets in an accident and kills 5 people? Or what is the probability of him maybe taking that freight back through Mexico, since only 3% of the loads that go into Mexico are checked? Very easy to get freight into Mexico. And then if he does do it and he does get caught, who's going to go to Mexico to arrest him?
Nobody.
So you have to know again, my point is you can't depend strictly on the software. You have to know a little bit about what's going on behind the scenes.
I know it might be hard for companies to do this, but again, because of time and everything moves at the speed of light now, just get to know a carrier. One of the things that just drives me wild is like, develop relationships with characters. Get to know the guy in your town or your area with trucks or somewhere where you're sending things. You can use a carrier from over there. I grew up old school, and I don't understand why people aren't still doing things that way, right? Like, I worked for the same small family company my dad worked for, and like they know all of their customers, and they don't have these problems. Their customers don't have these problems, right?
Yeah.
Because you actually put face to it. You know the carrier. And then something you mentioned earlier before you go here about like the sort of continuity of DOT numbers and MC numbers and all that stuff, right? And like, your MC number is no good because it's only been around for 3 months and you're a new guy, but maybe you have 30 years of experience. We see this on the driver's side too, right? Like, I've had my CDL now since I was 18. I'm 46. So that's 28 years. I've got experience trucking in 4 different countries. I've never been involved in a collision. Haven't got a speeding ticket or a moving violation since like 2005. I am the definition of what every trucking company should want. But because I got laid off a year and a half ago and I haven't really been trucking, I've been doing other stuff, that raises flags for them and makes me less of a prospect to hire. And it makes no sense, right? And then I also have to compete against all the new guys that are like willing to work very cheap, which I'm not willing to do.
Yeah, even worse on the carrier side. Is there a magic wand that after 90 days you're going to turn from a criminal to a good guy?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, so we have some issues to overcome. I think that the most important issue that I'm pushing, I'm going to the FreightWaves symposium here next Wednesday, and what I'm going to talk about is training. We need to train people. We've become a society that takes the path of least resistance. We just put an iPad in front of our kids and that becomes our babysitter. We just put a piece of software in front of our dispatchers and that becomes their babysitter. I'm making a decision off of what that thing said and I don't know anything about it. What if the internet goes wrong? Are you going to be able to vet a carrier by yourself?
Yeah, no, this is it. There has to be, as you put it before, the human element. And I think, people need to think about it in that way before you go. Like, so if anyone's listening that's like a freight broker, I have a bunch of people that follow my Substack, and like a certain percentage of the feedback I get is people saying, can you help me with freight fraud? Can you put me in the right direction? Our company had all these loads stolen. And like, I don't really write about freight fraud. I just sort of write about trucking and labor market economics and other stuff. But like, this freight fraud thing is so huge that people are like running around looking for trucking media people for answers. A brief couple of points for people to avoid freight fraud, and if they've been victims of it, what they can do, who they can talk to for help.
Well, I think the first thing you mentioned earlier is by building relationships again. We just don't do that. This whole world started on facial recognition verification, right? Back in the cave days, you met somebody, you trusted them, you did business with them, right? Then we fast forward to you have to have a password, you have to have fingerprints, you have to have, now facial recognition. But if you go to places like the Broker Carrier Summit, for instance, that's facial recognition started like it did in the caveman. We meet each other, we have dinner together, we talk to each other, we trust each other. I think that's where we really got to get to. And you have to sign up for these whether it's Highway, My Carrier Portal, Remis, FreightValidate, any of those companies. Sign up for. I don't care who you use somebody to help you. But if they are helping you, don't make the stupid decision on Friday afternoon to give a load to a carrier because you're going to save $50, even though they're bad in one of those systems, right? If you're going to use a system, use a system, right? The problem we have in the trucking business and in the freight brokerage business, we all got a gambling problem. We go all in on a load thinking everything's going to go all right. And when it fails bad. So when you are victimized by fraud, first of all, did you check that carrier before you gave it to them? Secondly, contact your insurance company first if it's stolen freight, and report it to whoever. Even though is the local police going to do anything about it? No. Is the FBI going to do anything about it unless it's super egregious? Probably not. But still report it because you have a record of it. It's a better chance of, and report it so that other people don't become victimized, right?
Okay. Well, that's a good place for folks to start. And they can find you at freightvalidate.com.
Yes, freightvalidate.com. And our email address is info@freightvalidate.com. I'm generally on LinkedIn. I've had some people thought that I maybe died because I hadn't posted something in an hour and a half.
But... It seems to me like you've got a pretty robust presence there. So,
yeah, I really want to get the word out to folks, and I really like to be, I sold my freight brokerage back in January just so I could concentrate solely on helping other people. I want my legacy not to be a guy that moved freight. I want to be at least give back to the industry that's been so great to me for 32 years. This is my payback. I'm going to help guys that are coming behind me.
Right. No, that's a great philosophy, sir. And seeing as how I'm not on the road, my payback is to try and help spread the word in whatever way I can, and give my homeboys on the road something to listen to, and maybe help somebody along the way. That's a great attitude, sir. And I really appreciate you coming on and sharing your experience and your advice with us.
Thank you very much for having me. I think, and it's voices like yours that gets my voice out there too, right? I can't do it alone, and I really appreciate you and doing what you're doing for the industry. It's very important.
Awesome. Well, thanks very much, sir, and way of the road.